This here is another viewer's broken gaming PC. This one apparently doesn't power on, and in the off chance that it does, because it apparently is an intermittent issue, it doesn't send a picture to a monitor. Most of us have heard of these symptoms by now, especially if you're an avid Fixer Flop watcher. It sounds like this could either be something super simple, like a power supply issue, maybe something isn't wired up correctly, or we could be looking at a defective component. The graphics card could be bad. Hopefully nothing on the platform side, but I wouldn't put it past it. The owner also mentioned he's missing screws in a few places, one holding up the graphics card here at the rear, one holding up the motherboard, actually a few holding up the motherboard. It's not the end of the world, something we can rectify a bit later. Task number one, however, of course the most important, getting the system back up and running, which I hope we can do by the end of this video. Are you ready? Stay with me. StarForge systems, like the one you're seeing here, come in all shapes, sizes, prices, and themes. Customize the PC that best suits you and let the experts at StarForge take it from there. Builds feature premium quality components, no different than what you or I might use in a custom build, and the attention to detail is excellent. Each StarForge PC is hand-built in Austin, Texas, and ships with a full 2-year parts and labor warranty. They sport tasteful cable management, option swappable plate lights in their Voyager lineup, which I'm a huge fan of here, and some of the coolest licensed themes on the market, if I do say so myself, including Terraria, Dragonlight, and even old school RuneScape. If only these rigs actually improved my mouse skills, which, yeah, are quite lacking. Nothing quite like Vorkath staring at me from inside my PC while it absolutely destroys me in-game. There's something sick and twisted about that. Look, the truth is, there are tons of builds, themes, and components to choose from at StarForgeSystems.com, including the latest and greatest graphics cards, so be sure to click the link below and pay them a visit today. Hello there, and welcome to Fix or Flop. In this playlist, we attempt to fix viewers' broken gaming PCs in and around the Orlando, Florida area for free. We don't charge for labor or replacement hardware, and that's thanks to our sponsors as well as your viewership. So thank you so much for watching. Now, if you were curious about this system's specifications before we dive into the troubleshooting, this has an Intel Core i5-11400F in here, a B-series motherboard, 32 gigs of DDR4, and an RTX 3080. So that's this beefy graphics card here, and it relies on 3 supplemental 8-pins. So yeah, a bit of a workaholic, nothing wrong with that. A bit overkill for a Core i5 from several generations ago, but nothing that a simple upgrade down the line wouldn't fix. Now, since we're dealing with intermittent power issues, I am going to be focusing most of my attention to begin with on the power supply. It'll be one of the first things that we test if the system doesn't power on at all. Also, front panel, if we have cables that are either loose or fully disconnected, that could explain why we don't get any reaction from the system. Apparently, the owner says sometimes the fans turn on, you get lights on the motherboard, but he doesn't get a picture out. I'm not sure if that's what we're gonna run into now or later. Place your bets. If my hunch is right or wrong, I would be willing to bet against myself in most cases. I think historically I've been more wrong than not with at least the first impressions as to what could be the issue. But I think it's important when we're troubleshooting to utilize a scientific method, so to speak. I want to present my hypothesis to all of you and sort of rationalize that up front. And then if I end up being wrong in the end, I think there's even more to learn about why I was wrong so that I can kind of like hone in my assumptions for the next episodes. Here we go, power on. It would help if the switch at the rear was on. Attempt number 2. Ooh. Oh yeah. Okay, so that power is on and then right back off. We do have low-level power to the motherboard. You can see some RGB near the top right illuminated, even when the system is not fully powered on, right? But when I do attempt to power it on, it only lasts for about a couple of seconds before shutting back off. I don't want to attempt powering on anymore for risk of damaging things further. We're gonna try the power supply first. I want to disconnect all of the primary cables and run them through my tester just to make sure we aren't looking at like a catastrophic PSU failure, which could very well take other components with it. And while doing this, we can take the time to scrutinize the remainder of the rig, see if there's anything that sticks out. Curious what it's looking like back here. Okay. A bit rat's nesty. I've seen worse, but I've certainly seen better as well. Anything in here could be, say, incorrectly wired. Maybe you've got a cable connected upside down or something, and that could very well cause the symptom we're seeing. Let's see what our trusty inline tester says. So it's on now. I can see the fan in the unit spinning, so that's good. Yeah, no warnings, no beeps. Everything looks to be a pass across the board, including ripples, timings. Yeah, slew rate, it's not great, but we're not under any severe load either. So if at first glance our power supply is okay, I want to start working backwards from here. We have to rewire stuff, right? But I want to start with just primary components, namely the platform. So we're going to power up with the 8-pin EPS and the 24-pin. I'm actually going to leave the graphics card disconnected. We're not going to get a picture out because we're dealing with an F Intel SKU, but I at least want to see if we can get the system to stay on. If I'm being honest, I'm kind of hoping this doesn't work because that could suggest that our graphics card is bad. Really hoping that's not the case because that's a very expensive component. I don't have replacements of those laying around. Here we go, power up. Same thing, turns on for a split second and then turns right back off. Alrighty, we need to go deeper. I will say, this entire motherboard looks to be only held up with 2 screws. Half of these standoffs, in fact, like these down here, this one on the top right, these are all missing. So like it doesn't even look like they were installed when the system was built, which could be a problem. I'm gonna detach everything else, peripheral-wise, front panel, USB 2, etc., and try to pull the motherboard out of it, just to make sure nothing's shorting the back of it. Oh, you know what I just noticed while removing the USB 3.0 cable? This DIMM right here, I don't know, it just never occurred to me, this DIMM is actually improperly seated. Now you can see all the golden fingers are exposed here toward the bottom of this outermost slot. Could it really be that simple? Here I am, overcomplicating things yet again. I'm gonna go ahead and physically inspect both of these DIMMs just to make sure we don't have any obvious damage. We've run into situations in this very playlist where improperly seated DIMMs result in like broken off SMDs, these small capacitors, resistors, whatever they are. Some of these can get lobbed off by the outsides of their respective slots. And well, good thing is these look to be okay. Unless both of them are damaged in the same place and I can't see the difference, these, yeah, they look to be all right. Could this be the very simple solution to our problem? I suspect so. No. It turns on and turns right back off. Well, we are back to square one. I really thought the RAM was gonna do it. I don't know how I missed that again, but this is not the first time this season where I've been sort of sidetracked by something else blatantly wrong. We rectify that and we still have another issue. Gonna follow my first hunch then, get this motherboard out of here so we can peek behind it. We'll also do most of our testing, I guess from here on out, since we have the board out, outside of the case. Ha! I already found the problem. So this standoff here is in the right place. That corresponds to this hole in the motherboard. I apologize, it's sitting very wonky right here, just bear with me. This standoff, however, you can see is slightly raised from the lower position, and this is totally motherboard dependent. In this case, however, you can see that this hole is clearly lower than this one. From the bottom of the board, yeah, there's much less space here, which means that this standoff should actually be in the lower hole. We're probably getting some sort of short behind the motherboard. If we take a peek around back, we can see some light scratches above this screw hole where that standoff would probably be rubbing if you're installing or removing the board. This isn't where it should be, of course. And then just above that, where it would sit if we actually measured this, it does look like there's been some light scratching, possibly revealing a power plane here. And it does look copper-ish. I can't tell for certain, but this could very well explain why we're seeing what we're seeing. My only hope now is that this revelation isn't a permanent one. If we relocate the standoff, will the system work, or is the motherboard damaged beyond sensible repair? We're gonna try testing things outside of the case first, just to be safe. I know this looks cringy, it sort of is. I don't want the board obviously touching anything conductive underneath, that's why it's sitting on cardboard, and I don't wanna disconnect the AIO block because that's gonna require repasting and removing all the old paste. It gets messy and it's just a quality of life thing for me. We're gonna try powering on again here. I just wanna see if the system will stay on. If it can, that's a win in my book. Let's jump the power pins. And it's actually staying on. We even have debug LEDs at the top of this board. That's gonna be super useful. So it's cycled through CPU and DRAM already. I'm gonna go ahead and power this off because we're not gonna get a picture out, obviously. We don't have a discrete card attached, but the light stayed on VGA, which is just saying, hey, we don't have any way to send picture out, nothing's connected, and that's totally normal. I think we've found our problem. For what it's worth, this RTX 3080 does look to be in pretty solid shape. It's probably newer than the rest of the rig, which wouldn't be out of the ordinary. Just wanted to point this out before we go about reconnecting it. First things first, we are relocating this lower central standoff. A simple tool like this, by the way, comes in super handy. You can find these sometimes included in PC case like screw boxes and whatnot, but one opening is specifically sized for standoffs in PC cases, and the other end is a Phillips head. So you choose a Phillips screwdriver to remove and tighten down standoffs. Also doing something a bit controversial, I'm moving his radiator fans for his 240mm AIO to the right side compartment, so on the other side of the motherboard. We're still getting the same push effect. So, well, actually it's different. So we're pushing air this time, whereas he was pulling air before. It's not really gonna make much of a difference. But this way, we can actually use the cutouts in this case to route some of our cables. It's not gonna look the prettiest. In fact, I don't even know if we still won't have enough space. Yeah, this whole case is just designed very poorly. If the viewer wants, you can switch this back later, but this is gonna make cable management look so much better back here, and will just make things easier to access in the future. I've been taking my sweet time with cable management, just trying to make a difference here compared to where we started. And well, it's looking nice from like here up. It's all this mess I still gotta figure out what to do with.
12 o'clock midnight.
Whew, yeah, this is a lot, and it's not perfect, but it is definitely better than where we started. Carefully get the graphics card reinstalled. Again, I'm hoping this is okay. The owner actually told me just now that this card was recently purchased, and I have no reason to suspect it's bad because, well, the symptoms existed even with the card removed from the system. But we are going to find out for sure here in a few moments. Get these bottom fans tightened back down. Really love these screws, by the way. They have this very like steep threading, so you only have to rotate them about once to get the fans tight. And here we are, a reassembled rig with the standoff in the correct location this time around and that one DRAM module fully inserted. Nothing else has changed about this system apart from some cable management. And this is the moment of truth. There are a few USB 2.0 cables that are not installed right now because we only have 2 ports on this board, and he actually needs 4 USB 2.0 headers in order to get everything powered up in this rig. So I've chosen to forego the 2 USB 2.0 ports on the top of his case. I figured those are probably not gonna be used very much since he does have one 3.0 type A port. The other one is for the NZXT AIO, and I believe this is what allows the owner to control the RGB in the AIO block. Probably gonna matter a little bit more to him that all of his fans light up. There are some expensive 120mm fans in here from Corsair, so I wanted to make sure that all of us got power. I still might not have wired those correctly, but yeah, let's see. No. No, 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 no. No. What? We are back to square one. If you watch closely up top here, firstly you'll notice the RGB is illuminated on this board. That's the low voltage stuff. And if I push the power button, one of these fans, yeah, this one here. So this one spun for a split second and then stopped again. And that is exactly what we saw to begin with. So we just did one big circle. I'm pissed. Let's retrace our steps then. So we know for certain that the motherboard at least stayed powered on when it was isolated from the case. The original CPU and the original kit of RAM were still attached. We even were able to see the debugged LED cycle through. So that was a good indication that whatever we had done to that point worked. The problem is we've since then reattached all of the Corsair RGB/fan hubs. Those are all attached. I think there's 3 of them in here, and they're all powered via SATA power. We have also reconnected, perhaps the elephant in the room, the RTX 3080. I'm really hoping is not bad. I don't think I'm gonna be able to replace that. At the very least, the owner will know for certain what needs to be replaced by the end of this video. I like to send these rigs back to their owners in working, ready to game state. That might not be the case here if this card is bricked. And a very easy way to tell will be to remove it from the rig and see whether or not the same symptom persists. This was what I thought was going to save us from having to replace this card earlier in the video, but of course we hadn't fully isolated it as a variable, And now that it's back in the rig, it's making me second guess things. So I'm just gonna rule it out once more. If this works with the card out, then we're screwed. Or I guess more precisely, the owner's screwed, which I don't want to be the case. There's not really a point in connecting the HDMI cable, because we're not gonna get picture out, but we can at least try for what looks like a post. Here we go. Okay. It's definitely something else then.
A lot of boring math later.
You are not gonna believe this. I'm just gonna show you. Power on at the rear. Make sure this is all centered on camera. Power on up front. Nothing, right? Turns on for a split second. If at all, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Now let's try again. Working just fine now. You're wondering, Greg, what did you do? Well, I held the power button down a little longer than normal. That is literally it. That's all I did. Now I'm attentively watching this monitor because I want to know if we get a post. If we do, then hallelujah. There we are. You know, I was starting to get a little cocky. Like after like 5 or 6 seasons of doing this, like you can't possibly run into anything you haven't seen before, right? There's just no way. There's only so many things that can go wrong with a PC. My friends, that is proven wrong time and time again. If you just push the power button like normal, the button fully actuates, it does what it's supposed to do physically. The rig just flickers on and off for, I don't know, half a second or so. But if you hold it down for about, a good second or two, the rig fully fires up. Oh, great, it's focusing on my reflection and not the mirror itself. Come on now, there we go. Just gotta trick it a little bit. I want to ease your nerves. This pump is churning fluid for sure. It's just not lit up. And again, that's because I haven't powered this via USB 2.0 because we don't have enough headers. That can be fixed with a simple splitter. So rest assured, CPU temps are a-okay. If our pump was dead, even in the BIOS, this temperature would be much, much higher. You've probably noticed these red LEDs blinking, by the way. So have I, and I looked this up. This is indicating some sort of transient power issue, possibly. Some folks have complained they've had like super beefy 1,000+ watt units, and they still have the blinking issue. And well, it's a curious thing because now I actually can't get the system to power on at all. I mean, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, right? Holding the power button down, that would normally work. You can see the graphics card lights up for a split second, but it doesn't want to do anything. If I hold it down, it irks me. I don't want to keep doing that. But it attempts over and over to power on the system, but no luck now. I'm gonna try this with a completely separate power supply. I don't like what I'm seeing here, despite what my inline tester was telling me. This smells like a PSU issue at this point, and I'm getting very annoyed by these repeated symptoms. Yeah. It's still flickering. Power supply is fine. Like it wasn't where I was literally about to prove to you that this thing will not turn on with a card installed, and now it just did. But then it throws us into that BIOS screen, which forces a reset, and then when it resets, it can't fully power back on because it flickers again like it did before. And then we're back to square one. Okay, now I've got to like hold the power button down, cross my fingers, hope that it posts again. And when it posts again, it forces us into the BIOS, forces a reset. That reset then causes another power tripping issue. So it's rinse and repeat. Like, I don't know what to do. Let's go deeper. We don't really have much of a choice. CPU cooler removed. Is the socket gonna be clean? Well, you know what, actually, it is pretty clean. Here she is up close and personal. I don't see any bent or missing pins. I think we're okay on this side. And on the CPU side, a few stains near the bottom of the IHS on the front. I'm not sure where these are from. I don't think that they're gonna be detrimental to anything, but on the back, it's pretty clean. We do have a few scuffs here. Is this thermal paste? Not totally sure. Could this be our issue? Just checking now before we replace motherboards. Is it gonna flicker? Yep, still flickering. Sometimes if I hold it down, it will fire up like so, but the original symptom is still there. So I'm convinced at this point that the motherboard is bad. With the board out of the system, I took a few moments to just kind of scan over things, wanted to just visually inspect quickly before we wrote it off. We're gonna be testing this later in the video, by the way, if what I'm about to show you does not fix things. But I realized that I didn't actually check the CMOS battery. That's something I try to check in most fix or flop videos very quickly with just a multimeter. You can measure voltage, make sure it's not dead. This is what that battery looked like. I'm gonna zoom in actually so you get the detail that I have here. So you can see that on the positive terminal, there's this like little piece of aluminum or something adapted to it. There's another piece, or at least there used to be, on the negative terminal as well. But this black little band around the battery, this is usually not here. And the reason why it's usually not here is because in most CMOS battery holders, so to speak, in motherboards, the connection that the battery makes with that holder is along the side. Well, obviously it can't make that connection here if it's being insulated. I'm not sure where this battery came from, but there's not going to be any power running from this battery because one of the terminals is completely covered. It actually looks just like a tape. I'm going to try pulling this off here. Here we go, finally. So yeah, just like some plastic. And this is what the battery should look like. I wonder if the board was even registering that a battery was in here. Like, I don't think it was. Also notice the board has several, I'm not sure if it's Chinese or not, definitely not English, stickers all over it. So a couple on the front and then several on the back as well. You don't usually see these with English US retail samples. So I'm curious if this was just pulled out of something overseas, or maybe it was bought on AliExpress or eBay and sent from China or somewhere, and it ended up being defective, probably because of this battery. I wonder if the adapted battery now with the removed tape will actually allow the system to boot up and not power cycle. I've given this board so many chances, and I'm not willing to write it off yet because I've never seen this particular symptom before. I think there's a lot that I'm learning from this video. As frustrating as it is to work on, I don't want to give up on the rig just yet. And so now that I've found that potential issue with the battery, I want to try powering it on with the power switch. I think the board is the problem. I actually off camera slipped in a working E11 400F and it did the same thing. I was hesitant to do that because I didn't want the board to kill my known working chip, but the exact same symptom showed up with my CPU. So the board is most definitely to blame. It's the only other thing in here. It does it even with no DDR4 in the rig at all. So I don't think his RAM is to blame either. We've gotten it to post several times with his DDR4. So this stuff seems fine. Yeah, the board's coming out. I try. I think I've exhausted all my resources at this point. I know you guys are probably getting fed up with me not moving on and just replacing the board. I'm annoyed by the symptom. The symptom is just so weird. Why does it stutter and sometimes hesitate to power on? And when it does power on, it throws us into this prompt that then forces a reset that throws us back into the cycle of not powering on fully. I'm not a fan of the behavior. I think definitely this time the motherboard's coming out. Surely this one won't power flicker, right? I'm gonna check this before we assemble everything else because I've done enough with motherboards lately. Let's jump right into it. I've got the power switch wired up. Here we go. Look at that. Oh yeah, oh, that's so good. One quick, short power button click. That's how it should be. So much better. Let's try this one more time. Just gonna push the power button very quickly. No weird press and hold or anything like that. Power on, pushing the button. Yeah, that's so much better. Oh, that's so much better. All right, enough with the powering on and off. Let's get the rest of this rig in here. I've paid very close attention, making sure everything is wired up correctly. I'm also curious if this graphics card is still gonna have its blinking red LEDs now that we've replaced the board. All right. Here we go. Everything's wired up. Drives are in here. I'm hoping that past the post, we can load into Windows. Let's just do it. Okay, off to a good start. Power button works great now, so it definitely wasn't the case. Sounds like it is posted. We do have, again, debug LEDs to reference, I think, in this board as well. Do we? Yes, we do. So right now the VGA light is on, and there we go. New CPU memory change. That is totally normal. Let me get a keyboard. Oh, okay. I guess I don't need a keyboard. Just wanted to let us know it detected a hardware change. It looks like it's already attempting to load into Windows, which is great. Getting devices ready, that's normal. When you swap motherboards, he might need to reactivate Windows. If it was already activated prior, I couldn't confirm that because we couldn't log in. But that shouldn't be a problem. If he wants, again, like a $15, $20 OEM key, should do the trick. No sense paying $100+ for a retail key, especially for an older platform like this that might be upgraded down the line. Any moment now, it looks like it just reset, so it should load in. And that's gonna be where we leave this system. Finally. It's good to be back. I have never been more happy to see a Windows splash page. This is music to my ears, or, well, eyes. Now, I did notice these Corsair Link fans below the graphics card lit up no problem. They're spinning pretty fast. The owner can calibrate his fan curves however he pleases when he has the rig back in his possession. Also notice that now we don't have any white blinking LEDs in the graphics card, so this thing was definitely trying to tell us something about the board. Either power distribution through the PCIe slot was improper, or there was something else, maybe sending too much power. It didn't like it before, and it seems to be okay now. Is there just a screw, like, sitting right there? I mean, it's not attached to anything. I don't want to risk this falling onto, say, the graphics card, even though it's a back plate. This could cause problems. Wow, that was weird. Not sure I didn't see that before. Anyway, what I was going to say about these upper fans is that they're clearly not lit. Now, these are powered. I checked all 3 of those RGB hubs, made sure they're all connected to SATA power, and I have run the necessary RGB hub from the hub itself to a USB 2.0 port in the board. So these should be customizable. They might be turned off by default. Not sure what's going on with Corsair iCUE. It'll probably change once he logs into Windows on his own. I've given the old board a thorough inspection since I have stripped it down to bare PCB. All of the shrouds, plastic bits, etc. have been removed. And well, I don't see anything obvious, nothing blown, nothing burnt, nothing missing. You can pause it if you'd like to help me out. That would be greatly appreciated. So pause the video for the front side and the back side here. If you see anything, let me know, timestamp it in the comment section. But this mostly looks clean, other than that one section of the back side of the board where the standoff possibly cut through into a power plane. I don't see anything else that is raising alarms. Right, so let's recap everything that we've run through in this video. I want to publish everything. I don't want to hide any clip where I maybe run down this rabbit hole that has nothing to do with the end result. Most of it I'm going to try to keep in the video, but I was a bit scatterbrained halfway through this, and so just full disclosure, you might not see everything that I've tested, and if I mention something here that you didn't see in video, my intent is not to confuse you or conceal mistakes that I've made. I've shown as many mistakes, I think, as possible in this series, and I want to continue that moving forward because there is so much to learn from making mistakes. And yes, even watching other people make mistakes, and I've made plenty of those. So to start, we isolated the power supply. This was a power delivery issue, at least it seemed like that on the surface. So we tested the power supply in here, confirmed through our inline tester that it did work. There was a minor issue with a few slew rates, I think on the 12-volt rails, but it didn't raise any red flags to the point where I felt like replacing the power supply, even though we did that later just because I felt cornered in the sense that the symptoms I was seeing weren't totally making sense. The power flickering eventually led to a realization that if I held the power button down on the case long enough, eventually the system would start up. Kind of like cranking a car. Sometimes, some cars take longer to crank. Maybe they have a weak battery, weak alternator, whatever it is, weak starter. That realization didn't really help much in the grand scheme of things, however, because the power flickering was, I think, a symptom of a larger issue. We ruled out a bit later the possibility of the front panel or the power button physically being defective by replicating the flickering by manually jumping the power pins on the board. Okay, so it's not the case. We also removed the motherboard, realized that a standoff was in the wrong place, noticed a small potential area for a short where it looks like a power plane might have been slightly punctured. I don't want to over-exaggerate this because it's a very, very small area, difficult to even see with the naked eye. But I've seen weirder things happen, especially when it comes to metal contacting places where it shouldn't. And so I'm not gonna totally rule that out. The graphics card was ruled out as a potential variable. Oh, and we can't forget the weird CMOS battery predicament where they had like an insulation ring around the outer edge of the positive terminal of the battery, which I've never seen in a motherboard setting. Super strange. I don't believe it was making contact, so the CMOS chip was essentially resetting itself with every power cycle, and that was why we were seeing this screen here. I believe this was a totally separate symptom unrelated to the power flickering. Again, I want to emphasize that, but that was something else we stumbled upon, not really relevant now since we've replaced the entire board. But throughout this process, you've probably noticed, I was led down many different paths that essentially resulted in nothing. I was convinced at one point the case was causing the problem, maybe the power board. I was convinced that the power supply, despite my inline tester telling me otherwise, was the problem. Swap that out, exact same symptom. So I really tried, perhaps more than I should have, to give the motherboard the benefit of the doubt. I think I gave it many benefits of the doubt, but in the end, replacing the board was the sound solution, and it has resulted in a system that now immediately posts and loads back into Windows the way that it should have from the start. The only conclusion I can draw from this, based on what we've seen here and what we've been told, is that there weren't any symptoms to begin with. This system did at one point clearly game. It has Windows installed. One of these drives here has Windows on it. And he felt confident enough to upgrade his graphics card to a beefy RTX 3080. Why would he do that if the system wasn't working prior, right? So I have no reason to think he was lying. Even if he was, who cares? I'm just here to fix PCs. But the story adds up so far. The standoff probably wasn't shorting anything to begin with, even though it was in that wrong place, but over time it likely rubbed through the silk screen, this upper layer of the board, and pierced some traces, revealed power planes that resulted in infrequent shorts, which is probably what we're seeing here with the LEDs flickering. Now, I can't say for certain if this permanently damaged the board alone, but one thing's for sure, the symptom still exhibited itself here even after relocating that standoff. So what can you do, right? I mean, you start probing random places on the board, hope you find the area of concern, hope you have a donor board with the exact SMD to replace, and there you go. I'd rather just replace the board, 80 to 100 bucks tops. I think it's just the cheaper, easier, more feasible solution. That's exactly what we've done, and that's what's gotten us to this point here. I just wanted to recap this because, again, I'm not sure, I haven't edited the video yet. Obviously, I'm still filming it. But there were a lot of confusing, conflicting things that I was running into, maybe things I was thinking, kind of like self-induced, but I just never seen this symptom before. It was very strange, but hopefully, if you happen to run into the same symptom, you'll now have like I guess a plan of attack. You'll know what to hone in on, probably the motherboard or something power related. I'm just elated that we've gotten the system back up and running. And that it didn't require like crazy levels of hardware swaps. Thank you so much for watching. I want to again reiterate, we have a link in the description. If you have a broken gaming PC, like a chance to have it fixed for free in this series, be sure to fill out the form there. You can check out all of our troubleshooting gear, cleaning gear, etc. in the description as well. Leave a comment below, let me know what you thought about this one, and consider sticking around for the next. My name's Greg. Thanks for learning with me.